Good morning, everyone. My name's Dan Jones, and as Kevin just mentioned, I'm head of consulting at SmallWorlders. Now, consulting, in my opinion, is just another word for strategy, and in fact, it's the strategy of intranet engagement that I spend a lot of my time thinking about and talking about, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about this morning. Before I start, I wanted to ask just a couple of quick questions to sort of gauge how we all feel about intranet engagement. I wanted to know, by a show of hands, who believes that it's the role of intranet managers and communicators to really drive intranet engagement?
What's the alternative?
Well, the alternative is the role of the technology or the design of the site itself. A few people. Okay, the role of IT then versus the role of internal comms. Well, what I'm hopefully going to show to you today is that actually it's the role of both. Okay, it's the role of technology and it's the role of communications to drive intranet engagement. In fact, intranet engagement strategy underpins the entire life cycle of the intranet, right from the planning stages throughout the development and the design, as well as launch and ongoing as well. Now I realise that's quite a claim, that's quite a statement. So what I'm going to try and do today is justify that and show a little bit about how it works. And I'm going to start from, you might think, slightly unusual starting point of a failed intranet. So here we go. Here's our failed intranet. It launches in a blaze of glory. There's a flurry of activity, as Kevin showed in his example, actually, and it quickly dies back. And we're waiting for it to grow, but all we have is a trickle of usage, which sort of doesn't really get much better. And after 6 months or so, our poor intranet managers left scratching their head, trying to work out where to go from here. And unfortunately, this kind of picture is all too common, and we do see it, and it's what we do at SmallWorlders to try and stop this from happening. So how do we avoid this? Well, I'm going to enlist the help of this chap here. Now, I know what you're thinking. This isn't a picture of Kevin from the 70s. This is Everett Rogers. In the 1960s, he put forward what is now the kind of familiar pattern of adoption for new technologies, which he called his technology adoption lifecycle. So you can see it takes the form of a nice bell curve. You've got the innovators and the early adopters leading the way. You then got your early majority, and then your late majority, and finally the laggards. And several decades later, this chap came along. This is Geoffrey Moore. And he developed the theory a little bit further, particularly in the context of high-tech products. And he associated some personality groups with these different adoption groups. Now, I don't know if you can see at the bottom, but we start off with the enthusiasts and the visionaries. Our early majority are the pragmatists. We then got the conservatives, and finally the skeptics. And in an attempt to explain really why so many new technologies failed to gather traction, what he proposed was, well, we're engaging the enthusiasts and the visionaries, but what we failed to do is make the leap really to the pragmatists, conservatives, and skeptics. And he called this his adoption chasm. And in fact, if you look at it, that's exactly what's happened to our intranet here. So what we've really done, ignoring the expected peak around launch, is we've engaged the enthusiasts and the visionaries, and they're responsible for our trickle of usage, but we haven't engaged the pragmatists, the conservatives, and the skeptics. So how can we prevent this sort of picture from happening? Well, to answer that, we need to understand a bit more about human behavior. And that's where this guy comes in. That's Maslow and his famous hierarchy of needs, where he attempted, or he basically explained the entirety of human behavior in a simple hierarchy like this. So you've got your basic needs at the bottom, security, survival, and you have your more aspirational needs towards the top, your accomplishment, self-esteem, prestige, and recognition. And crucially, what Maslow says was that you can't actually focus on any of these particular levels until you've first satisfied the levels beneath. And so we can take this hierarchy, and we can also take our personality groups from the adoption curve, and we can put them together like this, and it leads to some really interesting insights. So we could say, looking at this, we could suppose that to engage the conservatives and the skeptics, we might need to appeal to their more basic needs. Whereas your enthusiasts and your visionaries, they're going to be engaged out of esteem, accomplishment, prestige. And we can take all of those insights and we can put them together into a framework, into a strategy, and that's, of course, exactly what we've done. So we have a SmallWorlders 5-part intranet engagement framework. And here it is. So starting with the conservatives and the skeptics to really get these people on board. They're unlikely to visit the site at all, in fact, unless you give them some basic, unless you make it essential for their basic needs, for their day-to-day jobs to come to the site. So we need to give them reasons to log on. For the pragmatists, they may visit the site once or twice out of interest, curiosity, but unless we give them some compelling reasons to return, they're unlikely to become regular users of the site. And then thirdly, our enthusiasts and our visionaries, well, as we said, they're going to be engaged anyway out of their own sense of esteem and self-accomplishment. But what we aim to do is to leverage their natural enthusiasm so that they can lead the way for everyone else. So we need to give them some reasons to lead. Now, I did say it was a 5-part framework. These are our 3 kind of core principles, if you like, our building blocks. But we need some supporting elements as well. And one of those is a comprehensive communication strategy. Okay, so we need to find our ways to advocate. And then lastly, as we all know, building blocks need solid foundations on which to build. And in this case, our foundations are the space to operate. Okay, the space to maneuver. So we're talking about time, resources, and budget. And if we're going to try and get ourselves some of those, then we need to start making the case to management. So we're going to need some reasons to sponsor. So there we go, our 5-part intranet engagement framework. Now I said I was going to try and keep it quite practical. It's been mostly theoretical right now. So let's look at how we approach each of these different elements in the real world in practice. And we're going to start with the conservatives and skeptics. There we go. So for our reasons to log on, we need to provide functionalities on the site, features that have 3 qualities, and these are them. They need to be essential, they need to be exclusive, and they need to be easy. Now, I know Simon's going to talk about how to identify good reasons to log on later in his talk, actually. But some examples of essential functionalities are employee directories or office directories. In fact, often your person finder makes the most kind of popular, well-used feature of the site, and that's just because it's so useful, it's so essential to people. So that's a great one. You've also got reference repositories, so any knowledge of policies and procedures and governance might not be the most glamorous of stuff, but people do need to use it from time to time, and it can be an essential reason to go. There's also employee induction materials. The internet makes an excellent platform, actually, for onboarding and employee induction. And the added advantage is, of course, you get them accustomed with the internet as well, right from the very start. You've also got help and support. I think the internet could be an excellent channel to really manage all your help and support within the organisation, or certainly a large part of it. And it would make a great reason to log on. And of course, your transactional systems as well, booking annual leave, registering sick leave, anything like that. The internet, is a natural home, really. So that's essentially exclusive. Well, there's no point in having these features, if they're readily available elsewhere as well. So you need to make sure that, as well as being essential, they're also only available on the internet as well. And I'm going to come to easy in a second, because I wanted to just say a couple of things about internet versus emails as an alternative to emails. There's a great story from an internal comms manager at Thomson Reuters, and she started, I think it was on a 3-month contract or something, and she came in to the job, and she was shocked by the amount of time and effort that an entire team of people spent just writing emails and sending them out to different audiences just to communicate messages from the centre out, really. And she walked around the organisation and she spoke to employees, and she said, do you read any of this stuff? And it's like, no, of course not. There's far too much of it. We're just blind to the whole thing. We can't cope. So she went back and she had a little think, and she thought, right, well, we're gonna do things a little differently. We're gonna use the internet. We're gonna stop sending out any emails at all from communicating central messages. And we're gonna consolidate the messaging, and we're gonna let the internet actually segment the audiences correctly to who's gonna read what messages. And she did just that, so she started communicating via the internet instead. And as you can imagine, the immediate aftermath was total chaos. She had management on the phone saying, why do my team know this, that, and the other before I do? This is outrageous. And she just had to say, well, it's all on the internet, and your team are just better at checking than you are. And so, surely enough, after a month or so, their organisation adjusted. And it became a huge success. And what she'd achieved was not only an enormous boost to the engagement on the internet, but she found herself and her team had more spare time to be doing what they wanted to really be doing in their roles. And on top of that, she'd opened up a two-way communications channel where previously there was one, because no one would respond to these emails. Of course they wouldn't. But actually, once they were kind of in the format that they were on the internet, people would comment and conversation would be sparked on the back of them. So it was a really successful internet, and of course it makes an excellent reason to log on for her as well. And she certainly had no problems with engagement on her internet. Now coming to our last sort of quality, how to make it easy. Well, we need to remove barriers. So bear in mind that we're talking about conservatives and skeptics here, and whilst they might not necessarily be sort of technological Luddites, what I'm saying is basically they're going to be there against their will. We force them to be there because they've got no choice. So we need to make sure that we remove barriers as much as possible. We need to make these features really easy to find. So if at all possible, place them directly on the homepage. If that's not practical, then certainly put big links on the homepage, big buttons, so that they can be very easily found by people who are feeling a bit out of place. And of course, once they get there, they need to be easy to use and easy to operate as well. These people, they turn up expecting the worst, and they might be pleasantly surprised. You might turn around a couple of opinions, how it was easier than they're expecting, and of course the opposite could apply as well. If you don't make it easy, then all you're doing is confirming their worst fears that the internet's a horrible place, they didn't want to be in the first place. So there we go, and if you achieve all of that, then we're going to have some pretty compelling reasons to log on. And I would say these are typically not your most glamorous of features, your person finder, your policies and procedures documents. It's not really exciting stuff traditionally, but this will form the bread and butter of your usage, your adoption, and your engagement. And frankly, if you could only focus on one of these things, this would be the one you should do. Okay. So next we've got the pragmatists. How do we keep the pragmatists coming back again and again? And we've got three more things. So for the pragmatists, we need features that have these three qualities. They need to be useful, they need to be interesting, and they need to be likable. This is how we're going to keep them coming back. Now, starting with useful, how do we make an intranet useful? That might seem like a pretty obvious requirement for an intranet, but here I specifically mean useful as opposed to essential, which we covered in the reason to log on. So we need features that are going to enhance people's day-to-day jobs in some way. So good examples of that are team rooms or collaboration areas. They're often very useful. You could have ask a question kind of feature where people can ask questions and others will answer. Certainly best practice libraries and inspiration can enhance people's jobs nicely. Obviously, you've got your news feed. If you follow the example of Thomson Reuters, then that's going to certainly enhance the jobs keeping informed. And specific tools and toolkits that you might have that are related to people's roles as well. Now also remember that useful, in inverted commas, is going to mean different things to different people, and you might not want to put everything that could be useful to somebody straight up there on the homepage. So consider personalization as well, particularly in terms of the homepage structure or the structure of the navigation as well, and see if you can just present the tools that are useful to the right people at the right time. If that's not possible, then you just have to consider which features provide the most direct benefit to the most number of people. And you should be able to get on this one. Next up, we've got interesting. How to make an intranet interesting? Well, many people might say that's an impossible task, but actually I'm specifically talking about these three things: regular turnover of content, personal relevance, and continuous evolution. I'm very fortunate. Wedge is going to talk to us a bit later about making your content very interesting and fascinating. But we need to make sure that it turns over regularly. And as a general rule of thumb, they say the user should never see the same homepage twice. If you think about the BBC and you go log on in the morning, you read all the interesting news, and then you come back after lunch, and it's all changed, and you've got more stuff to read. In fact, you'd be shocked if the BBC was the same. This is good. I think I'm leaning on the HDMI cable. That's not. There we go. All right, so we might not be, talking about BBC levels of turnover, but if you think, your employees are expected to visit the intranet maybe once every day or every other day, that's the kind of frequency of turnover that I'm talking about. And there's various ways you can achieve that. You might be fortunate enough, you might be very fortunate enough to have a team of editorial people that are sort of churning out really high quality content all the time. Just like our example from Kevin, the speaker, talk earlier. If you're that fortunate, then make sure you don't make the same mistake that we did, and make sure you put this stuff on the homepage. Make sure you flaunt it, because it's a great asset to have, and it will just keep the homepage looking fresh all the time. If you're not that fortunate, there's other things you can do. So if you have any user-generated content, people are uploading their own stuff, then make sure that any new uploads are on the homepage somewhere, maybe down the side. Latest uploads. It's a great feature, and it just keeps it ticking over. Activity feeds are another great way of keeping it all changing, because you don't have to manually intervene, but it will continuously change. And obviously, if you're using your homepage for some news and comms as well, then that will help the regular turnover, and that'll all help keep the site looking interesting. Personal relevance. Well, we spoke about personalization in the useful part, but by this I mean relevance of the content itself. So you want to think about making the actual content that you present perhaps personalized to the particular user. So you can do that based on maybe their job role or their office that they're in. Maybe if you've asked what their personal interests, you might be able to personalize it to that. Though you may have cleverer ways of personalizing content, but it will definitely help keep the site sort of feeling relevant to each individual person. And you don't necessarily need to label all of these things as personalized this, personalized that. Sometimes it's better just to keep it discreet and let people just feel like you're in tune with what they want to be reading about. And then continuous evolution. This in the age of sort of Google and Facebook, we're all they don't make any big releases anymore. All they do is they make small kind of iterative changes. In fact, so small you barely even notice until you see a screenshot from Facebook from a couple of years ago, and then you realize how much has all come on and how much has all changed. And you can do the same with your intranet. So you can make small adjustments to your homepage. If features are working or not working, don't be afraid to change them around a little bit. The same with your navigation as well. If you're getting any kind of user feedback, small and often is often better than waiting for the next big release. And of course, the added advantage of that is that you don't get any pushback from people if you change everything all at once. There's always people that aren't going to be too impressed. So continuous evolution. And if you focus on these three things, then you're certainly going to provide an interesting site that your pragmatists are going to feel is useful for them to come back to and interesting. And then the last element of our reasons to return is likability. And by that, it kind of boils down to two things, really. It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be fun to use. So easy to use, this is going to be quite heavily the focus of Simon's speech. I'm not going to say too much about that. But you need to make sure the site is easy to navigate, and the functionalities are nice and easy to use as well. I'll leave the rest to Simon, but also fun to use. So not necessarily Minority Report here, but we do need a nice, slick, glossy design. It needs to look really great, especially since we're all used to, in our kind of personal lives, we're all used to websites looking impossibly slick and really great, and apps on phones as well. So the internet should be no different, really. And as I say, there's no excuse for poor user experience these days. So if we focus on those elements on the side there, then we're going to be sure to appeal to the pragmatists, and they're going to be coming back again and again. And then our last two personality groups in the organization are the enthusiasts and the visionaries. How do we make sure that they're going to lead the way for everyone else, like we want them to do? Well, firstly, I'd say you could do a lot worse than just leaving them to it. Don't get in their way, because they're enthusiasts, right? But we do need to make sure that we at least give them the right environment in which to sort of thrive. And if we do that, then what we're going to do is to supercharge them really into the kind of super users that we really need to seed activity and interest and excitement throughout the site. So to do that, we need to ensure that the site appeals to those top levels in the hierarchy, really, of the prestige, recognition, the aspirational ones. And for that, we need to provide opportunities for contribution, visibility, and leadership. So here I'm basically talking about social features, user-generated content. So obviously we're going to have our kind of commenting, liking, rating. They're great ways for people to sort of make small contributions to the site. But beyond that, posting articles, participating in sort of discussion forums. These, again, we made the mistake, and many have, of basing an entire intranet on social features, and that's probably not, for most intranets, the right thing to do. But you do need to make sure these features are at least available somewhere, so that our enthusiasts and our visionaries have got this kind of channel to really contribute in the way that they want to. And if we let them contribute enough, then they're going to get that sense of sort of prestige and recognition that they want, provided, of course, that we give them the visibility once they've contributed. So there's no point in anonymous contributions or even just putting their name. If at all possible, you want to include their profile picture. So if they post an article, you want a big picture of them smiling next to the picture, next to the kind of name of the author. If you're leaving a comment, if you have the option, you want to put people's faces there. There's also other things you can do, maybe the latest contributions list. You can always put an author's picture there, or there may be sort of, if you're really going for it, top contributors is a great sort of thing you could have, maybe not on the homepage, but somewhere prominent, and these people will get the visibility, from the contributions that they're making. And then the third sort of aspect of this part really is leadership, of course, because it's reasons to lead. We need to provide opportunities for leadership. Now, there might be certain enthusiasts and visionaries in your organisation that feel that they've got expertise or skills or opinions that they might want to be sharing with their colleagues, and we should give them opportunities to do that. So you can give people maybe a blog, an opportunity to sort of start conversations that way. There's also groups as well, that if you can organise it, then these people can be actually leading those groups and managing and leading the conversations in the way that they want. There's other ways that they can provide leadership as well. We have supporting others. So in the reasons to return, I mentioned they might find ask a question useful. Well, these are the people that are going to be answering those questions. Your real enthusiasts and your visionaries. If you have help and support forums as well, these people can be in those as well, kind of contributing and showing a bit of leadership. And then, of course, we have ambassadorial opportunities as well, which I'm going to talk about in my next part, and our ways to advocate. So there we go. There's our reasons to lead, and this is the sort of the last of our three core building blocks, if you like, and the last of our checklist of qualities that we need to make sure that we cover for our features on the site. But of course, we have our two supporting elements, and the first of those is our ways to advocate. So how do we create a buzz around the internet? And how do we use that buzz to sort of propagate the kind of momentum from launch, not only throughout the organization, but sort of forwards in time as well? How do we keep that momentum going? Well, there's many facets to a good communication strategy, and I realized at this point that I'm addressing a room full of communicators, professional communicators. So I'm not going to talk today about traditional comms, because there's not much I can really add, probably. But I wanted to just focus on two other elements that I particularly like, and one of them is senior management involvement, and the other is ambassador networks, or yes teams. So we'll start with senior management involvement. There's various ways that they can get involved. You have your obvious traditional ways, publicly backing the site. They can be interviewed for articles, or if they're doing any talks or speeches or appearances, they can be seen to be backing the site publicly. Well, that's fine, that's great, but there's a little bit more they can do as well, and that's actually getting involved on the site itself, contributing to the site itself. And you have the kind of the famous CEO blog that's sort of always quite popular. But I would say that unless you're prepared to pretty much write the blog for them every month, that's going to quickly run out of steam and become more of a kind of conspicuous failure than this kind of great engagement driver that you're hoping. So rather than the CEO blog, perhaps just encourage them to make small, kind of infrequent contributions from time to time. Leave a comment at the bottom of an article, or maybe post a status update. They could be thanking someone or sort of saying what they did today. But those tiny little kind of contributions that they make are going to spark an enormous amount of excitement and sort of interest from the masses, because the CEO is getting on the internet and joining in with everyone else. There's a great story I heard from a community manager at Bosch, actually, and she she had a number of enthusiastic people from within her community that ran their own blogs, okay, and they took it quite seriously, and they were posting quite frequently on their various sort of subjects of interest. And she was also one of those people that was manually writing herself the CEO blog every month. But she would meet with the CEO monthly just to discuss what, if there's anything that they wanted to include in the blog. And while she was with the CEO, what she would do is she would encourage the CEO to read the blogs from these other people, and to leave comments at the bottom, and then say what they thought. And so you can imagine the kind of the reward and the motivation felt by these blog people that the CEO was sort of commenting on their blog, and of course it helped spark conversations as well around the comments that the CEO had. And from the CEO's point of view, they really enjoyed engaging with some particularly enthusiastic kind of members of their organisation as well. So it was a great initiative that she had, and a great way to really get the senior management involved and drive engagement. I had one more thing to add here, and that's just, if you're expecting these very busy people to be commenting and posting status updates, bear in mind that the chances they're going to have are likely to be when they're in the back of a taxi or an airport departure lounge or something. So make sure that, hence the picture here, make sure that you make it easy for them to do this on their mobile devices or their tablets. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. And then our ambassador network, our Yes team. Now, I can't emphasize enough how much I think these are just such a great resource to build and to have and to help your communications sort of effort, really. Firstly, you need to recruit them. You can get them largely from your kind of enthusiasts and your visionaries. They should make themselves reasonably apparent just because of their activity on the site. But sometimes anyone with influence or seniority would make a great ambassador. And quite often, if you have any skeptics that have had they change their minds on it, really, they can make extremely powerful ambassadors as well. And here's what they can do for you. So the obvious one is amplification. So it's spreading the word to other sort of employees. So you've got, they can be doing that through casual interactions. You can do it through more structured stuff, such as writing articles or other kind of offline activities, perhaps. They can offer you insights as well, because they're going to be interacting more with the employees than you are. They can be feeding back to you about any negative or positive feelings that are generally floating around from the internet. And also, in fact, on the insights thing, they can, if you have any new features, you might want to give them sort of early access, because it will certainly give them a feeling like they're involved a lot more. And they're going to be a great sort of test base to test out new features. Your Yoast team. Support as well. You might not be able to communicate or respond to every communication that you have from every single user, but these people are great. They're well placed to be able to handle that responsibility as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the help and support forums, if you have them, give these people the responsibility to man them, and it will be one less thing that you have to do. And then finally, events. If you're a large organization and you're kind of widely spread, then you're going to want to try and do local events, certainly to build awareness, or maybe training, in each of these kind of locations. And your ambassador network are the people that are either going to help you or even sort of manage it on your behalf. So plenty of reasons why you should be building an ambassador network for your team, and it's just great way to really kind of add to your communications effort. In fact, I had an example. There was a guy called Dan Spicer at Hootsuite, and he ran their global kind of ambassador network for the brand. Now, it wasn't an intranet; it was a sort of a public ambassador kind of community. But he provided for them an online ambassadors community, which he heavily gamified. So you had ambassador points, and you had ambassador levels. And their ambassador network was extremely competitive, and the way you earn ambassador points was to sort of accept a challenge. And so, for example, go to the help and support forums and answer 3 questions, and you get a certain number of points. Or put on an event in your local city and to raise awareness for Hootsuite and get a certain number of points. And this was so successful. Some of their ambassadors were becoming really, really active and really kind of sort of trumpeting for Hootsuite, and it got to the point where they were being so sort of busy on behalf of Hootsuite that he ended up phoning them and saying, "Look, you're doing so much for us. Do you want to just come and work for us full time?" And in fact, about half of his team now are made up of people that were just really enthusiastic customers who worked their way up through the ambassador network. And now they're working for him full time, and he certainly doesn't have a problem with his sort of employee engagement. in his team. So I mean that's a great way to manage your ambassadors. And of course the other thing to remember is that running an ambassador network is really cheap. You don't need too many resources because it's all based on the enthusiasm and the kind of backwards and forwards between you and your ambassadors. So a couple of ideas how to sort of enhance your communication strategy. It's worth remembering as well that even though a lot of this is centrally choreographed, you can make it look spontaneous and user driven, and that really helps. The kind of the appearance of this as a spontaneous thing. And then, how are we doing for time? Okay, so finally we have our reasons to sponsor. Okay, so in order to achieve everything that I've spoken about, we need to make the case to management just to get the kind of the resources that we need. Now, there's plenty of resources online that will attempt to kind of place a value of an intranet to an organization. Most of them are dubious, in my opinion. Most of them are written by vendors who are just trying to get you to buy the product. But if you really want to do that, that's fine. You can Google it. What I'm going to focus on instead is trying to show how a poor performing intranet is actually hindering your organization. So, as we know, management are busy people. They're not going to be interested in anecdotes or empirical evidence or stories about what might or might not be working. So, what you need to present them with is numbers. So what it boils down to is we need to make sure that we have a measurement strategy in place to back us up. And there's two metrics that I particularly like. Firstly, our own engagement score, which you're all very familiar with after Kevin's talk. And the other one is one called top task analysis, which is another very it's a popular method, and it's based around measuring how long it takes to complete key tasks on the internet. Now, for the engagement score, all you need to do really is plot yourself on a benchmark, and if you're not doing particularly well, then you can use that to build a business case where you need more time and budget and resources to turn the situation around. And for the top task analysis, it basically gives you a number for how much time is wasted on your internet due to inefficient design or bad layout or whatever. And again, you can use that to go to your management and say, look, we need more time, budget, and resources to turn the situation around to improve the situation. And because they're both numbers, they make excellent KPIs as well. But you do need to make sure that you have your measurement tools in place first of all to gather the data. It's quite hard to come in late in the day and try and put together an engagement score, as some of you might have found out, unless you make sure you've got your data gathering capability planned into the plan. And also the same with the top task analysis. The engagement score's an ongoing thing really, but top task analysis is more of a periodic thing. You might want to be doing that every 12 months or so, and so you want to make sure at least you've got that in the planning so you know it's coming up. And so there we go, that's our 5-part intranet engagement framework. As you can see, what we've created really here is a fully rounded engagement strategy. It's designed to appeal to all the different personality groups within the organization, specifically according to their own needs and requirements, really. And what I've got here is a checklist of all the features that you should really handily have by your side when you're sitting down to plan your intranet. And as I mentioned, Simon's going to be talking after the break about how you actually go about planning your intranet. But if we rearrange these items into more of an executional list, executional ordering, and this harks back to my original question about technology versus communications. You can see that it is indeed the role of both. You've got your technology and design on this side, and you've got your communications at launch, and there's an ongoing thing over there. And you can see it really is the role of both these things to really drive your engagement forwards. And if you do all of this correctly, then what you're going to find is we're going to be engaging not just the enthusiasts and the visionaries, but we're going to engage the pragmatists, conservatives, and the skeptics as well. We're going to bridge that adoption chasm, and we're going to go on to enjoy a long-lived and highly engaged, successful internet. And that's it. As they say, always end on a graph going up. So there we go. Thank you. Do you have any? Were there any questions? Hello.
The task completion rate, what does good look like?
Well, okay, yeah. The task completion. Well, okay, yeah. So I didn't really explain any of that. I mean, you can always go online, and because it's a massive field, but what it boils down to is you measure, okay, first of all, you identify top tasks within the organization. There's methods for doing that. And then what you do is you take a sample of 50 or 100 people in your organization, and you actually stand over their shoulders and you give them tasks to complete from these list of key tasks, and you watch them complete it, and your time, how long it takes them to sort of successfully do it. And then you compare, and you take an average, obviously the average time it takes to complete task X, and then you take someone who's an experienced and a competent user who understands and knows what they're doing to do the same task, and that becomes your expected time. And then you compare the real time with your expected time, and the theory goes that anything more than your expected time is wasted time that could be reduced if you designed your intranet a bit better. So that's how that works. But the thing I like about it is it's still a number, and it speaks to management, because wasted time is a great way of actually making your case.